I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And guys, please like and subscribe. If you do like what you're listening to, please inform your friends and family. It is a very imperative time that we get our family back understanding finances and understanding how the world really works. Now, of course, if we understand how the world really works, we wouldn't fall for this game that's being played. That's why we're not taught finances in school. Now, I want to thank those who purchased the book, Cryptoteacher, also the NWO book, also those who donate to the channel, Cash App, Patreon. Guys, first, basically you saw the Steve Jobs video, very motivating. I'm going to touch on that at the end, and then of course I give you a video to make you think. But guys, going over Bitcoin right now is steady right now, but of course it is going to go lower because we have Bakkt. Remember guys, it's Bakkt that we're going lower. There's no other reason. So don't let nobody go over technical analysis. I just played a video before. Everything is rigged. Everything is planned, guys. So the reason why we're going down is because of Bakkt. We know to keep our eyes on the stable coins. So of course, like I've taught you, once stable coins go 99 and below for a certain amount of hours, then you know we're going back up. So of course, that'll probably be a few days from now, because Bakkt, of course, lasts a few days. So going over Ripple and Ripplenet. Now, of course, we have internet, we have the World Wide Web. So, of course, with the web, you're entering into the web, you're entering into the net, interconnecting. And basically, same way with Ripplenet. It's just interconnecting, connecting the dots. Now, with XVIA is very interesting. Because XVIA is advertised as payments for the emerging markets. Now, one deal that they made is very, very interesting. Of course, is UnionPay. And UnionPay is the largest, mobile payments in China. I think they do like over $2 trillion. So, guys, that is very, very, very interesting that Ripple is in China. Now, of course, communist country, they're supposed to be doing their own thing, but they have a deal with Ripple. So, as we know the funding behind Ripple. We know central banks are behind Ripple. Now, with UnionPay, basically you have Yahweh, you have PayPal agreement, you have ProPay agreement, you have Tencent, which is a large, very, very large company. So, billions and billions of dollars. And I think UnionPay is only second to Visa as far as with transactions. So, Ripple is definitely putting its work in across the globe. And it's like I said, it has its footprint in China. It's like I said, which is very, very interesting. And that goes back to my Anthony Sutton videos as far as with the rise of China. Now, guys, we also have Chainlink has done very, very well, especially if you're doing trading. It's done very, very well. And guys, make sure we are still keeping an eye on the repo market. Basically, they're still pumping money. As we know, the Fed is going to be buying everything. Now, basically getting to Steve Jobs' video, which is very, very interesting, which I knew he was adopted, but I never heard the story. Watching that video of Steve Jobs allowed me to understand why he had that chip on his shoulder. Because at the end of the day, you always want your real mom, real father raising you. So he had that drive in him from that, even for him to even bring that up and do the research. Because as a kid, you would never even know unless somebody actually told you, or you actually did research on how your birth went and all that good stuff. So he definitely had a chip on his shoulder, and that's the reason why he strived for excellence. And you could see that all throughout his career. But the fact is that he invited that evil entity, which is Bill Gates, in his universe. And basically we know the story of him going into Xerox, as far as Steve Jobs going to Xerox, taking the tour. He didn't want to go through the tour of Xerox, but he ended up going, found Windows, he paid them, and then of course Bill Gates steals it from him. But the irony of it though is that you have Bill Gates' dad, who was in charge, used to be called eugenics, and then they turned it over to Planned Parenthood. And basically what that was to do was to get rid of feeble-minded, what they called them, middle class, lower class, white people, and blacks. So if you look at it, Steve Jobs would have been one of those what they call feeble-minded. So if you look at the universal God, the Most High, He put those two together. That's yin and yang. That's all it is. And if you look at any video with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates can't even look him in the eye because he knows the truth. And he knows that Steve was just so much better at him. I mean, so much better than him. And when you look at Microsoft, it never created anything. Once Steve passed, there was still a lot of things. But once Steve passed, Microsoft just was not innovative. And as we know, if Steve was still alive, your cell phone probably could walk right now. You know, that's how the drive that he had in him to create. So that, just like I said, that's the irony of it. It's so crazy. Me watching that story and me understanding Bill Gates and Bill Gates Sr., and then realizing that Steve would have been one of those kids that they would have called, the feeble-minded. One of those babies that they would have been trying to get rid of. And he became this, excellent man. But that is out of this world. But I thought that was a wonderful story. Just to hear that. And then for him to meet the opposite of himself and Bill Gates is just out of this world. But I do have a video. The next video, of course, is about the C word. I just want to make you think. Just like I said, everything is planned. But guys, that's all I have for you. Don't forget about the video I'm going to leave at the end. Don't forget about the book, Cryptoteacher NWO. Don't forget about Binance, Bitrue, Coinbase as far as the coins. Don't forget about the stocks, your chip stocks, your cobalt, your gaming, your banks. Never bet against the banks. Also, everybody's sitting at home. Don't forget about those stocks. And then, of course, when you have over 6 million people unemployed, people are depressed, anxiety, they're going to drink and smoke weed. So don't forget about investing in those stocks. And y'all have a wonderful day.
You just said, I think is critically important. Can you repeat what you just said, please?
Well, last Friday, I received a 7-page document that sort of told me that if I had an 86-year-old patient that had pneumonia but was never tested for COVID-19, but sometime after she came down with pneumonia, we learned that she had been exposed to her son who had no symptoms, but later on was identified with COVID-19, that it would be appropriate to diagnose on the death certificate COVID-19. Now, we've not done that. If someone has the pneumonia and it's in the middle of a flu epidemic, and I don't have a test on influenza, I don't diagnose influenza on the death certificate. I will say this elderly patient died of pneumonia.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but my heart is sinking right now as you're telling me this. You're a doctor. Why in the world would they be sending you out information to fill out death certificates, whether the person's been diagnosed with COVID-19 or not, but then to say in the death certificate this person's death was caused by COVID-19? That does not sound right to me.
I went to the person in our office who does most of the death certificates over the last 10, 20 years, and I said, does this sound right? I had her look at the documents that I printed off, and she said, well, we've always been told that you always put down just facts. You don't put down any probabilities. You don't put any presumptions down. It's just what you know. And so this is concerning, and it actually gets to your point, Chris. When we start talking about the data that goes into the modeling, we have to ask ourselves a question. Are we being forthright? Are we sharing with the public? Minnesota, North Dakota, we don't need to be having it sugar-coated. We want to know what's going into your modeling.
So with that being said, why would they want to skew the number of deaths due to COVID-19?
Well, fear is a great way to control people, and I worry about that. I worry that sometimes we're so darn interested in just jazzing up the fear factor that